Welcome to Gallant Current Affairs and News Analysis. Today we have about 3 to 6 topics, 3 in mains and 3 in films. Let's look into the first question. China's deflation a cause for concern. In yesterday's class, I told you the concerns of what is happening in deflation in the case of China. I told you some statistics like the consumer price index has been fall for the first time in 2 years, and CPI declined by about 0.3% in July from earlier, and also there was a drop in the producer's price for the 10th consecutive month, contracting about 4.4% in July. This is contrast to the rest of the world where inflation is taking place. In China it's deflation, whereas the rest of the world is inflation. Now here what we need to know is what is deflation, how it affects the economy in the last run. So deflation is the reference of general fall in the case of prices of goods and services, whereas inflation is a general rise in prices of goods and services. So many economists believe that deflation is a sign of falling demand of goods and services, which could lead to slowdown in the economic growth. So you need to know how this deflation is going to affect the economy. We as a consumer think that there is a fall in prices in goods and services, so it will be very good because we would be getting the thing or the goods cheaper. But the thing we need to know is that how this is going to affect the economy. You might not believe, but the thing is that if there is reduction in the case of prices, the profits the company makes are going to be reduced. When the profits or the demands of the goods reduces, the company is forced to lay off some of the people, or they might even freeze new hiring. So because of which they might create increased unemployment in the economy. If there is increase in the case of unemployment, the people won't have enough money or the income in their hand. If they don't have money, they would spend very less, and thus the demand would further reduce again. So it kind of creates a vicious cycle because this deflation is going on. Another major concern is that the falling prices can also push buyers to postpone their purchase. You might heard your mother saying like to purchase, in the case of purchasing of gold, you might say that like in 2-3 days there has been a decrease in the price of gold. Okay, so if you are going to wait few more days, the price might decrease further. So these might actually, like a case scenario like this, the falling prices may actually prompt the consumers to push their purchases again, and this is also going to affect a lot because it's also going to lead loss of businesses, and it might lower our economic growth also. The thing is, we need a certain amount of everything. We need a certain amount of inflation, we need a certain amount of deflation, but if it's going to increase, it's going to affect the larger economy. So that is the vicious cycle of how vicious cycle is created in the case of deflation. Now we need to know that this is one set of economists actually believe that deflation is like, as I have told you, it's going to affect the economic growth and it's going to slow down. But there is another category of people or economics stating that deflation might not necessarily actually stagnate in economic growth. If we are taking countries like the US, China, Japan, even during their peak economic growth, they have actually witnessed some point of time, they have witnessed a kind of deflation. And the deflation might be even caused due to the rise in supply of goods, and because of that it's not meeting the money supply, outpaces the supply of goods, actually outpaces the rate of money supply. So this present deflation might even be caused because of that. But the thing is that the deflation might not also be a sign of the economic turmoil. Now you see here, during times of economic crisis, spending by individuals can also drop temporarily. It might not be the case there is no income with the person, but during the economic crisis, for saving more, he might stop spending altogether. So sometimes deflation as the official price indicator can also be a sign of process of real allocation of resources in the economy as well. These economists actually argue that the prices are not that determine the consumer demand. In the case if we are taking essential goods, even if the price rises, we need to purchase that goods. So the author is stating that the price doesn't determine the consumer demand, it goes other round. The consumer demand actually determines the price of the goods. Moreover, deflation need not cause sustained business loss as well, and people might not even take or postpone their chances. But these are all categories like 50% people may do that and 50% may not do that. So these are all depending upon chances. Now we need to know why this kind of deflation is happening in China. China is experiencing deflation, whereas the other countries around the globe is experiencing inflation. Now this deflation is not just caused because of this lockdown or ongoing war. This deflation was present in the Chinese economy even before there was a pandemic. Now the likely reason for the Chinese deflation may not be the lack of liquidity in the ongoing economy, it can be totally fundamental also. So the author states that they need to study the Chinese money supply more effectively so that they can find the root cause of why there is deflation in the Chinese economy. So that is of the first article. Now moving on to the second article. Will the federal fund hike impact the developing country debt? The Federal Reserve is the US central bank. So what we need to know is how is US central bank affecting the rest of the countries, especially a country like India, which is developing country. So we need to know how the Federal Fund Reserve or the Federal Bank of the US is affecting a country like India. So we are going into a background like the US, they had like the repo rates. In the case like US Federal Reserve, US Federal rate is similar to that of the repo rates in India. So earlier the Federal Reserve rates were like near to zero. It was kind of near to zero. So there has been, now presently they have increased this near to zero rate to about 5.25 to 5.5%. Now this is about a 450 base points increase just within an year. So that is what has been a concern here, because this 450 basis point has been increased within a year and is the highest in the last 21 years. Their aim is to reduce inflation, but we need to know how the rise in their repo rates is going to affect a country like India. So you see, I told you that they have like a near to 0%, like they might go to near to 0 or 0.5% is what there was in the case of their federal banks. So that was the lending rate or the repo rate of their federal fund rates of US. So when a person is borrowing money, they don't get much return from it. So a person in USA or America, they borrows money from this bank and then come and invest in a country like India, which is actually a developing country. In India, we are giving a lending rate about like 6 to 8% or 6 to 9%. So what these people used to do is that they used to put money in India, so they get a lot of profits. So the problem is, what happened here is that the US, they have increased their repo rates or their Federal Reserve rates to about 5 to 6%. Now these investors are pulling back the money which they have invested in India, and they are actually putting back in US banks and such. So it's not a very big difference, but the thing is that US is much more stable and India is a developing country, because of which there is a lot of risk in the investments in the case of India. So what is happening, there is capital flight. All the investment that came into India, there is a capital outflow of this investments that has been taking place in India. That is what I have actually mentioned in this slide. Now how this affects is that it's going to actually depreciate the ancient rupees and currencies. It could also increase the borrowing cost in India. Like when there was investors in here, the borrowing cost was much more cheaper. Now as there is a capital outflow, there is going to be an increase in the borrowing cost also. And also because of all these constraints and financial constraints also affecting the country's climate goals. So what could be done? Now US here is only thinking about itself and its domestic currency. The US is actually not thinking about the global outcome of what this US policies could affect the global phenomena. So to ensure that a collective effort is needed to reform the international financial system. So that is what the author has been suggesting, and also to create or scale up a contingency finance for the needy countries, and expansion of affordable long-term financing for the development is required in the case to overcome this issue. Now similar to that in India, we have another issue where our CPI, our consumer price index inflation has been increasing. Now our consumer price index inflation is about 5.1%. Now the RBI and the Monetary Policy Committee are stating that it might even go up to about 5.4%, which means that it could increase by 30 base points. Now what the Monetary Policy Committee is telling that they are not going to change the repo rates right now. We are going to not change the repo rates, which presently I think it's about 6.5%. They are not going to increase the repo rates if this threshold is breached. If the 5.4%, like the inflation goes beyond the 5.4%, then the Monetary Policy Committee would take some decision to tackle this issue. They are feeling that the current inflation is because of the food inflation, especially driven by that of tomato prices, and because of this inflation in the food can be actually is temporary in nature and can be revived by the government themselves if they actually timely ensure the supply side constraints. If this supply side constraints is met by the government, the price of the tomato would be automatically reduced and the inflation level will reduce within the economy. So that is what the Monetary Policy Committee is believing. Apart from that, the RBI also temporarily increased the cash reserve ratio about 10% so have to maintain or drain the surplus liquidity that is present in the market. They also, the MPC has also flagged several risks why this inflation is happening right now, because we have uneven rainfall, we had also increase or spike in the crude oil prices. These are some of the temporary reasons why there is presently inflation within the economy. So they are not currently going to change anything or not going to change the repo prices right now. They are going to move ahead with it and going to see how this inflation is going to affect the economy. In this regard, what you need to know is about the Monetary Policy Committee. This Monetary Policy Committee was created in 2016. Before that, all the decisions related to inflation was taken by the RBI governor alone. So after 2016, the Monetary Policy Committee was created, which consists of 6 people, 3 from the government service and 3 from the RBI governor and 2 others. Now this Monetary Policy Committee is actually chaired by RBI governor and they have to meet at least 4 times in a year. Also they have to submit a report every 6 months stating why there is inflation in the economy and what will be the inflation in the coming forecast inflation for 6 to 18 months ahead. Now this policy was created by amending the RBI Act of 1935. So these are some of the facts that is associated with monetary policy committees, and a question was also asked about this in 2017 in the case of prisons. We will be seeing that question at the end. Now, Chief Election Commission of India Appointment Panel. The problem, like, you have to look a lot here. Initially the Chief Election Commissioner and the Election Commissioner, the Election Commissioners was elected by the President. For this was actually recommended by Prime Minister and Council of Ministers alone. The problem here is that the present government has a monopoly in the appointment of the Election Commission of India and other election commissioners. This actually creates unbiased favor that the Election Commissioner might be in more favor with the present government and create a lot of tussle within. So the Supreme Court actually came with an idea to appoint, there should be an appointment panel which consists of 3 members to recommend the election commissioner, which will be later appointed by the President. This panel will consist of the Prime Minister, Leader of Opposition and the Chief Justice of India himself. But the problem here is that this is a violation of separation of power. What is judiciary doing in the executive, which is under the legislative? This would be a breach of separation of power. We knew the case there was NJAC, like the Supreme Court stated as unconstitutional because there was actually a breach in the separation of power. Now this is like contradictory because they want to be here, which is actually a panel which is going to appoint an executive which is under the legislative. So to remove this tussle, what the present bill is that they are going to remove the Chief Justice of India from the panel and they are going to create a new panel for the appointment of the Election Commission of India. So under this there is a search committee and a selection committee. The search committee consists of, is headed by the Cabinet Secretary and 2 other persons who is not below the rank of Secretary to the Government of India. What they do is they are going to appoint a panel of 5 people. From these 5 people, this selection committee would have to appoint 1 Chief Election Commissioner and other 2 Election Commissioner. So they are going to create a panel of 5. That is the function of the search committee. Now coming to the selection committee, I told you there was Prime Minister, Leader of Opposition and Chief Justice of India. This Chief Justice of India is going to be removed. So the new panel will consist of the Prime Minister himself, also the Leader of Opposition, but the Chief Justice of India would be replaced by a Union Cabinet Minister who is nominated by the Prime Minister himself. Why this? Like, if you are looking totally, before I told you there was unbiasedness in the selection process or monopoly of the government in the selection panel of the Election Commissions of India. But if you are looking after removal of the Chief Justice of India, they are again putting a government cabinet minister. Now you see the vote goes again 2:1. There is only 1 opposition. Now again there is a monopoly in the selection panel. So that is one of the drawbacks of this present bill. So these are something which you need to know. You need to know the old composition, Prime Minister, Leader of Opposition and CJI, and you need to know the new composition of a search committee and a selection committee. Now moving on to the next, Indian GPS Navik to be linked to Aadhaar enrollment devices. Previously, before this, Aadhaar was not enrolled to Navik. So now presently this Aadhaar enrollment, even Aadhaar, where this enrollment of Aadhaar has taken place, the location would be tracked via this Navik. So you also need to know what is Navik. Navik is Indian Regional Navigation Satellite System. It consists of 7 satellites. It's more like GPS, but it's a smaller version. It covers only about 1,500 kilometers. 3 are in the geosynchronous orbit, geostationary orbit, 3 in geostationary orbit and 4 in about geosynchronous orbit. It covers an area about 1,500 kilometers. It includes India and other neighboring countries also. It provides the services similar to that of GPS to India. So Indian GPS Navik to be linked to Aadhaar enrollment, that's the news, but here what we need to majorly know is what is Navik. Moving on to our last topic, India-Japan studying ways to restart trilateral cooperation with Sri Lanka. So you see here, before 2019, the East Containment Terminal Protocol, it is based in Colombo, which in Sri Lanka. Now this project was awarded to India and Japan. Under the East Asia-Africa Growth Corridor, which is actually parallel to that of the BRI of China. So that was a very friendly government back then who awarded these projects to India. But coming off to the Rajapaksa brothers, they actually took the project away from India and Japan and gave it to China, because of which we lost this East Containment Terminal project. But in 2021, they were having a lot of economic issues and financial issues, because of which, to gain a good interest with India, they actually award the West Terminal product to Adani Group. Now this East Terminal product is also coming back to India and Japan, so they are looking into new ways to how to develop this East Containment Terminal. So these are not the only projects which has been taken by India, Sri Lanka and Japan together. Other projects like there is other ports development, railway developments, oil pipeline near Trincomalee. So these some of the other projects that the India Sri Lanka are also doing together. It's a very small topic. There is a lot of history in India Sri Lanka relations, but I can't cover that everything in today. So this is something which small thing which you need to know. This East Containment Terminal is developed by India. Also this West Terminal of the Colombo port. Now to the prelims practice question, as I have told you, Monetary Policy Committee, this Election Commission. The Election Commission of India is a 5-member body. The Union Minister of Home Affairs decides the election schedule for the conduct of both general elections and by-elections. The Election Commission resolves the dispute relating to split, mergers or recognition of parties. Presently, our Election Commission consists of 3 members, the Chief Election Commission and 2 other Election Commission. So the first statement is wrong. The Union Minister of Home Affairs decides the election schedule. No, it is totally recommended by the Election Commission of India. There is no role for Home Ministry. So the second statement is also correct. Election Commission resolved the disputes relating. So only third statement is correct. So that is it for today. We had a very small session today. So you can get the PDF from our Telegram channel, Gallant IAS. Thank you, and we'll be seeing you again tomorrow. Thank you.